Production switchers come in all sorts of different sizes and can be equipped with quite an array of feature sets, from built-in Chroma keys to the ability to stream to your favorite platform. Some are built with the most taxing I/O requirements in mind, while others are fashioned for ease of use and portability. In today's video, we take a closer look at the up-and-coming Osee GoStream DEC Duet to see what it brings to the table, so stick around. Hey everyone, this is Ryan Corcoran with Broadcast Buddy TV, the all-around go-to channel for all things broadcast television. And on this channel, it is our goal to equip you with the tips, tricks, and know-hows to help make you a better broadcaster. So if you're new to the channel, please consider subscribing and hit that bell icon so you never miss an upload. And with that being said, let's get started. Now, if you've been watching me and this channel for some time now, you'll know that I'm no stranger to production switchers. What you may not know is that smaller switchers like the GoStream DEC Duet are not particularly my wheelhouse. That's why I was particularly intrigued when Osee reached out to me to do an honest review of this product. As a matter of fact, the closest thing I've worked on that falls within the same playing field would have been probably my very first switcher, the old school Panasonic MX70, which unironically echoes many of this switcher's all-in-one feature set. So with all that in mind, I agreed to do an honest review and they sent it out to me. So we should probably take a quick moment to note that the GoStream DEC platform itself is not exactly new and has been out for almost a year now at the time of recording this video. The Duet version that we are reviewing today, however, is hot off the press with a couple new features that the original didn't bring to the table. The first and most visibly obvious are the 4 3G HD-SDI BNC connectors on the side. This addition automatically puts the switcher in a higher field of play than the others in its space. The addition of the BNCs allow ease of connectivity to higher-end broadcast cameras and gives the physically secure connection that HDMI lacks. And as a broadcast engineer, I am here for it. Using HD-SDI over coaxial cable also gives you, in the best of circumstances, 6 times the distance to your video sources than standard HDMI can. Another new feature to call out on this guy is Osee's inclusion of an NDI HX license, whereas in the original, that was a buy-up option. This allows for a compatible NDI HX device to be streamed over a common network as a video input to the switcher, which actually doesn't count against the 4 baseband video inputs that come from either the HDMI or HD-SDI inputs. This NDI HX input lands in a separate auxiliary input that can also be switched to either an external storage device or a USB camera. But new features aside, what do I actually think of this thing? Well, as a newcomer to the product review space, I wanted to really focus on the key elements that were important to me as both a technical director and a broadcast engineer. So I decided to break this review down into a few key categories: intuitiveness, ease of setup, feature set by price point, support, and documentation. So how did I test for intuitiveness? Well, in the most stressful way possible. You see, we have a graduation ceremony we're contracted to do, and the timing of this event couldn't have worked out better for this review. It's a 6-camera shoot with graphics, so right there, based on the scope of work, this switcher would have been overlooked. But I decided to take it along anyway and set it up to run tandem to our other switcher. Now, all I knew going into this experiment was what the GoStream DEC was capable of by reading over its feature set. I didn't watch any tutorial videos or read any manuals ahead of time. I started setting this thing up 30 minutes prior to the start of the actual show. Don't worry, everything else was already set and good to go. I ran 4 BNCs off our truck's router, plugged them into the switcher, routed the cameras, and fired it up. I took the HDMI outs to feed the built-in multi-viewer and program feeds to my engineering monitor and my little Atomus for confidence. I want to stress that I pulled this right out of the box, threw it straight to the wolves. I didn't even take the time to upgrade the firmware. Once this thing was on and running, I started to push buttons and discover. And I have to say, within about 15 minutes, I was through the majority of the menus and had already made a custom 2-box effect, renamed my sources, set an IP address, and a bunch more. I was really impressed at how intuitive the menu system was and how it was accessible directly from the multi-viewer output. I also found it interesting how I could continue to switch sources and still be in the menu making changes. Something to note on though is the menu is a little laggy if you try to quickly scroll through all the menus. It also does cover up one of your source pips when it's open. Some other things I discovered while poking around that I really liked were things like seeing the option to swap preview and program pips of the multiviewer. It's an extremely small thing, but as someone who's taught production switchers all over the world, there are directors and TDs that live or die by what side the program is on. Another small attention to detail I liked was the ability to preview a transition without taking it to air. There are big switchers that can't even do that. While digging around in the keyer menus, I liked how key types could be easily switched between the 4 options: Luma, Chroma, Pattern, and Picture-in-Picture. What I didn't like, however, was the naming convention of Luma key. Don't get me wrong, having the ability to select what source your fill and which one your alpha is excellent, but this does make it more of a linear key as opposed to a Luma key. Calling it a Luma key suggests that it's generating its key alpha channel based on the luminance value of the fill source. Just minor semantic thing, but it did catch me off guard just by reading the specs and gathering that it couldn't do a true linear key. But because it can, that means you can still dial in a still image file that has an embedded alpha channel like a 32-bit PNG and use that as a key by assigning one of the still stores to the fill and the respective still store key channel to the key. This also means that you could use an external graphic system like a ROS expression. However, keep in mind that this would burn 2 of the 4 available HD-SDI inputs, one for the fill and one for the key. But hey, if you're only using a couple cameras plus a webcam camera, you still have 3 total cameras plus live motion graphics. Another thing I noticed is the switcher lacks the ability to dissolve either the upstream or downstream keyer on post-transition. Sure, you can use the next transition area, which side props for a switcher this size for even having a next transition area, but only being able to toggle a key on with a cut via the on-air button is a huge disadvantage in my opinion. Including a menu option that would allow you to choose the behavior of the on-air button from being either a cut or a dissolve, and if it's a dissolve, then independently the transition rate would be a welcome addition. All of this, again, I discovered within the first 15 to 20 minutes of operating. So during the first graduation ceremony, I basically cut some cameras, played with the super source feature, and tinkered a little with the embedded audio coming in from my cameras. The source buttons felt nice to the touch. However, depending on where I'd press down on the button, particularly on the center, it goes through like a 2-stage position that you have to go through to get the button completely pressed. It's kind of hard to describe, so I'll show it here. It was harder to notice if I pressed the button harder, but if I'm just rocking my fingers across the preview bus, it's very noticeable. The T-bar had a good resistance when engaging it for a manual transition and felt great to use. It was also nice to find out that there was some audio follow video function available on the core inputs, which can be set to either a hard cut or dissolve. Also, having additional audio channels from your aux video sources and up to 2 additional delayable micro line level analog inputs is nothing to bat an eye at either. So once the first ceremony was over, I had a couple hours until the next one. So I decided to start digging into some of the other features. First though, I wanted to upgrade the firmware to the latest. The switcher arrived on version 2.0.0 and 2.1.1 was current on the website. I downloaded the files onto an SD card and loaded them onto the switcher. The entire process took just about 3 minutes. I liked the progress of the upgrade being shown in the lower multi-viewer pip. After the upgrade, the switcher rebooted and we were back to the races. Pretty painless. And now that we were on the latest firmware, it was time to start digging into the other cool features, such as NDI functionality and the brand spanking new software. But before that, I wanted to just make sure I took some time to finish tinkering with some of the other base features that I knew I could test there in that moment. I went ahead and uploaded some stills into the still store via the SD card and played with the keyers. I also tried to record some macros from the panel, but could not figure out how to do it. The only thing under the macro menu was the sleep time, so I had to be missing some combination of keystrokes from the panel. That definitely took off some points for intuitiveness. Side note, I did find out later by reading the manual that I just wasn't long pressing the macro buttons long enough to kick them into record state. But in all honesty, other than that, the only other feature I didn't find inherently intuitive was setting up the NDI HX source. I even broke down and cracked open the manual for that. But unfortunately, the manual didn't have anything about setting up NDI. There's a strike against my documentation category. Ultimately, I had to figure out how to set the NDI source from another YouTuber's video. Spoiler, you just long press the play button. I did find it super helpful, however, that the NDI pip shows a warning message when it detects the wrong kind of NDI. In this case, not NDI HX. After that, I downloaded the software GUI files off the website and installed it. Upon launching it, there was definitely some weird scaling issues. The software didn't like the resolution my laptop was in, and the scaling applied through Windows. I had to change my resolution to 1920 by 1080 with no scaling to get the GUI to look right. Aside from that, my first impressions were kind of, yeah, this is alright. From a graphical design standpoint, it looked pretty clean and it was super responsive. The menus were laid out a little bit different than the menu on the multi-viewer, so I did have to briefly get used to where everything was, but I will say, point goes to the software because I was actually able to figure out how to record a macro from there. And you can see from the video that by using the NDI streaming tool, I was able to stream my laptop's desktop screen to the switcher as well. Awesome if you're sharing PowerPoints or even gaming. Audio over NDI is also supported. And that was it. That was the end of my spur-of-the-moment field test. After that, I had a 4-hour drive back home with a lot to think about. Once I got back to my studio, I fired it back up and started to tinker with some more of the features I hadn't been able to test yet. Things like streaming functions, Chroma keyer, and webcam inputs. When it came to setting up a stream, naturally I picked YouTube as my test bed. After plugging in a network cable, I double-checked the switcher's network settings and was happy to see that under the DHCP, the IP subnet, gateway, and DNS were all populated, which allowed for added confidence that the device was able to resolve a DHCP address and would be able to hit the internet from my network. I then pulled up the streaming settings and started to scroll in the streaming keys. At this point, it was obvious that this was a little tedious, and so, as it does, my curiosity got the better of me and I decided to plug a standard USB keyboard into the USB 2 port, and to some surprise, I was able to type in the key. I could even do a Control-A to select all and a Control-X and P to cut and paste. I'm also happy to report the copy and paste does work between fields, and the keyboard can be used for any fields that take a text input value. This can definitely be a time saver when doing things like naming your sources. After that, I fired up the stream by pressing the live button on the panel, and just like that, we were streaming. I decided to spin up a Facebook stream as well, just for fun, and the process was just as simple. Select the platform, type in the key, hit live. This feature definitely gets 5 stars in my book for ease of setup. Next, I wanted to play with the webcam input. Plugging my 1080p Logitech webcam into the USB port 2 wasn't difficult, and all in all, it instantly came up. But of course, to do so, I had to unplug my keyboard that I was already very fond of. But then again, my mind began to wonder, well, why not both? And yes, I'm happy to report that you can do both. I grabbed a USB hub and was able to get both my webcam and keyboard running at the same time, which, playing around with the USB webcam also made me think, would this work with an Osee U-Tap? For those who don't know, U-Taps are little devices that allow you to adapt either an HDMI or HD-SDI source, depending on the model, and treat them as a USB webcam source. Sadly, after hooking one up, it didn't appear like it was going to work. Osee, if you can find a way to have the GoStream recognize U-Tap, that would be insane. That would allow for potentially another HD-SDI source within the aux input. Finally, I just wanted to tinker with the Chroma key to see how intuitive it was. It really wasn't hard to set up and start keying Wally against my green screen drop cloth. Without taking time to set a good chroma wall and 3-point lighting, I'd say it was fair enough. Applying a mask around the edges was also very straightforward. In a bit of a lightning round, I did also want to test the functionality of recording to an external flash drive, and wouldn't you know it, I just plugged it into my USB hub and I still had my webcam and keyboard functionality while recording to my 128GB flash drive. Now, what I did find was as soon as I plugged in my flash drive, it took priority over the SD card that I had already installed. I saw this visually in both the increased amount of recording space and in what stills I was able to see to load into the switcher cache. I did find later on in the software that this could be manually set. I also took a quick stab at the BitFocus companion plugin. I didn't do much with it, I just wanted to see what actions were made available, which was quite a lot. I made a button to perform an autotrans. As I was playing with it, the connection did lock up on me once, so I had to restart the connection to the switcher from the app. So then, what is it lacking? For starters, there are no interlaced formats accepted. That's right, progressive only. Genlock. Having the ability to bring in HD-SDI is awesome, but being able to bring in house reference for time switching would be stellar. Built-in tally or external device control. It's a major minor thing for me, and I understand these things are probably missing because of the price point of the switcher, and I know there are always clever solutions using third-party hardware and software workarounds for that. So then, who is this for? Given my experience with the GoStream DEC Duet, I can honestly say that this little switcher packs a big punch. Its feature set makes it a bit of a Swiss Army knife and almost essential tool for those with smaller I/O demands and a larger emphasis on portability and being streaming centric. This switcher's all-in-one nature makes it a perfect solution for the one-man band, and I'm sure it's going to keep getting better. Osee as a company seems to want to listen to its consumers and improve the product based on feedback. The GoStream DEC Duet itself seems to embody that with its hardware and software improvements over the original. So what do you think? Have you used the GoStream DEC Duet? What are some of your favorite features and how are you using them? Also, make sure to tell me how you like this format of video. Do you think I should do more product reviews? What would you like to see on the channel? Make sure to let me know in the comments below. As always, thanks for watching, and we'll catch you right here next time on Broadcast Buddy TV.